Growing your business can mean big-time logistical questions like, how are we going to keep up with all these local deliveries? Let Uber Direct offer you a helping hand. With Uber Direct, you take orders on your website, app, or by phone. Then drivers who are part of Uber's courier network pick them up from your store and deliver them to your customer's doorstep. Sounds simple, right? Delivery just got better with Uber Direct. Learn more at uberdirect.com. How can operating a franchise brand lead to multi-generational success? Hello, this is Jonathan Mays, Editor-in-Chief of Restaurant Business. And in this week's episode of A Deeper Dive, I speak with Kerri Harper-Howie, a second-generation McDonald's franchisee out of Southern California. Carrie has written a book, The Family Secret, The Business and Franchise Owner's Guide to Building Generational Wealth. We talk about that book and the story behind it. We talk about her parents and why they got into the McDonald's business. We talk extensively about her mother and the impact she had on the family, on the people that worked with her, and on the community. We talk also about the benefits of getting into a franchise like McDonald's and all kinds of other things, such as the number of eggs I can crack at one time. We also talk about the operating environment in California and what it takes to succeed there. This is a great conversation. I got to talk with Kerri for a long time, so please check it out. I'm here with Kerri Harper-Howie. Kerri, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
All right. So you are a McDonald's operator. I want you to start by tell me a little bit about your history, how you got into the McDonald's system.
Sure. So my mother became a franchisee with my father in the early 1980s. They opened their first restaurant here in Los Angeles. The first location they actually opened is no longer. It's been torn down and relocated. But so I grew up really in what we call our McFamily. And pretty much from my elementary, high school, college years, I definitely was in the McFamily, but had no interest in working in the McFamily. I knew that I wanted to be a lawyer from a very young age. I pursued that, and that was my path. And I actually practiced law for about 11 or 12 years before I joined what was at that time my mother and my sister. They were our family business. And then in 2012, I had my first son. And as the cliche goes, your children change everything. And I think for me, the biggest change was I was very happy at that time to observe my mother and my sister from the sidelines. I supported them as needed. I was an employment lawyer. So as you can imagine, as an employer, employment lawyers come in very handy. And so I cheered them on from the sideline. They did very well for themselves, very successful. And then when I had my oldest son, I really started thinking differently about legacy and what that meant. And I was fine initially with my mother's legacy being she was a great businesswoman. She and my sister were good business partners. But when I had my son, that feeling of legacy and the idea of legacy became very personal. And I thought to myself, what kind of legacy do I now want to lead? Not even just, to society in general, but to my newborn son. And so it took me about a year of thinking and mulling and deciding and agonizing a little bit about making the transition from being a full-time lawyer to working with my mother and my sister. But I finally decided to take the leap. And so in March of 2013, I literally worked my last day as a lawyer. I actually did a mediation. And then 3 days later, I was working fries in one of my mother's restaurants.
All right. So from mediating complaints from mediating legal cases to mediating the fry basket, fantastic. What was so early 1980s? Now, if I'm not mistaken, that means your parents were probably some of the earliest Black franchisees in the system. Is that correct? And where are they?
For sure, I want to say. You said they were some of the earliest, and what was your second part of your
so they were probably
question?
some of the earliest Black franchisees in the McDonald's system, if I'm not mistaken, were they not?
That is correct. I can't give you the number, but in the early 1980s, McDonald's was looking to increase the number of African-American franchisees. And at the time in Southern California, the general manager for this area was an African-American gentleman named Reggie Webb. And Reggie went on to be a really big part of introducing African American franchisees, especially here in Southern California. He himself also went on to be a franchisee, and he and his family just retired from McDonald's within the last 3 to 5 years. But yes, they were definitely early adopters, and it was a big leap for them as well, because my mom was a social worker and my dad was a police officer, and they both cashed in their retirements and, used that as the down payment for their first restaurant.
So police officer, did you say a teacher? Did I hear that correctly?
She was a social worker.
Oh, she was a social worker. That's right. Okay. Um, so they had some savings and they got into the business. I mean, that's fantastic. Decided, do you know why? Did they ever tell you why they decided a McDonald's system to make that leap from pretty decent careers to going and slinging burgers?
Very decent. And like I said, pension paying jobs. You're absolutely right. My aunt actually had met the Webbs a few years before, and she had become a franchisee. And so I think my mom was able to see the success that my aunt was able to experience. And as a result of that, my mother thought that she too would take the leap and get involved. And interestingly, now my mother, who was the last on board, at least in that little group, she's the only one that continues to be in the business, because the Webb family is out, my aunt and her family are out, and my sister and I continue to work to carry on the next generation of my mother's business.
Now, where are the stores?
Where all of our restaurants are in LA County. So we go as far north. We have one restaurant that's near what would probably be called East Hollywood. And then we go pretty much down south, kind of through the middle of the city of Los Angeles. We have about 8 restaurants in LA. And then we go into Inglewood, which is where my sister and I were born and raised. We have a restaurant in Carson. We own all 4 of the restaurants that are in the city of Compton. And then we've also got 2 in Linwood. So it's it's a kind of, I think of it in my head as like an L, because we kind of go down LA and then head east.
Mm-hmm. So now, did you work in the restaurants when you were young? I mean, did you work the fry station?
So I don't think I share the story that many do, which is like every day after school, elementary, middle, etc. I was in my parents' restaurant, but McDonald's was my first job. And so the summer after my 10th grade year, I worked at one of our restaurants. And, I was just like any other employee, myself and one of my closest cousins. We both got a job there, earned some extra cash. And, for me, I was kind of like, that was my first exposure to think, this is not for me. I don't want to do this for the rest of my life. So I'm going to go on my path, become a lawyer. And that's what I was going to do. And it wasn't that experience that turned me on to lawyering. I think I already knew at the time, but that summer cemented it. It was a fun summer, but it's like, I don't think so.
Yeah. The funny thing is I worked at McDonald's when I was a teenager. I've probably, some people who've listened to this podcast once or twice probably know this. I think I've told this story before, but I worked in McDonald's as a teenager, and actually worked there for a couple of years into college, and was good enough. I can actually, I still have skills. I can crack 2 eggs at a time while holding 2 other eggs in the process. I can flip, I flip burgers. I'm that old. I'm burger flipping old, right? But I was like the same thing. I told myself, I'm like, first off, that's hard work. I mean, I don't think people listen to this podcast, operators know exactly. It is hard work. Working at McDonald's, man, you're sweating. You smell like garbage at the end of the day because you're smelling like old grease, and you're probably handling garbage in the process. You're getting burned. You're on your feet the whole time. It's hard work. And I'm like, I'm going to make something myself. That's literally what I told myself. And the only thing, and now of course I write about this stuff all the time. And the thing that I know now that I'm far more mature, is I know what I could have done had I simply stayed in the business. Restaurants is one of those businesses, and better than anybody else, frankly, that you can come in with no skills whatsoever and build for yourself a really wonderful career with some hard work. And
That
that's
is
the thing.
absolutely true. And I want to go back to you saying that you had worked there as a teenager. I'm not sure if you're aware, but we have a campaign called the 1 in 8 campaign.
Mhm.
1 in 8 Americans has worked at McDonald's at some point. So you are in great company. And that includes, people like, mega billionaire Jeff Bezos, and to all of the people that we hire for their first time job. And, kind of to your last point, there are a lot of people who have that story who say, I started as a crew person and now I own 10, 15, however many locations. And I've created opportunity that will potentially last in my family for generations. And it is really hard work. I cannot tell you. So as I was making my career transition from, full-time lawyer. So at the time that I was my last full-time job, I was a senior director at 24 Hour Fitness. I was responsible for all of the employment and advice and counsel work for half of the country, right? I'm doing big things. I'm mediating things. I'm, handling cases with outside counsel, writing briefs, all sorts of stuff, advising people in the C-suite. I'm big time, right? Or at least I think I'm big time. So a part of my deliberation was, I love it here. I love being a lawyer. I loved my job at the time. I loved the company. My boss was great. And I'm like, how am I going to be challenged or engaged working at McDonald's, even though I had done it as a teenager? And when I tell you, one of the most humbling experiences I had was my general manager at the time, like, you cannot keep up with fries. You are too slow and get out of the way. I mean, it was I was like, wait a minute. I'm smart. Why can't I keep up with these fries? This is insane. And so, I share that very humbling example to say, working at McDonald's can be incredibly challenging. Learning customer service skills, learning all of the
Mhm.
complexities of our kitchen and the different systems and all of the things. And, you're absolutely right. You can learn it. Anyone can walk in the door and with enough training and enough time can learn it, but it's not easy. And I really defy anyone who's like, oh, you're just working at McDonald's. I defy any of those people to walk in there and try to run fries for a lunch rush on any day of the week. And they will have their hat handed to them.
Yeah, yeah, filtering the fry vats. My goodness, that was some tough work.
It's a lot.
All sorts of stuff. Yeah. Oh yeah. And then, you get a rush at the end of the day, and then you're making a bunch of burgers and at the same time and frantically trying to get everything done. Yeah, yeah, it's definitely some hard work. So now, so I want to get back to when you were talking about that you wanted you were thinking about legacy. And so I want you to talk about, you just wrote a book on this experience. Tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So I have written a book. Thank you for
Mhm.
asking. It's called The Family Secret, and a business and franchise owner's guide to building generational wealth. And just a little bit about why I wrote the book. In 2017, McDonald's did a campaign for International Women's Day. And during that campaign, they picked a restaurant of all their restaurants in the world, and they decided to flip the iconic golden arches to look like a W in honor of International Women's Day. And of all the women franchisees in all the world that they could have picked, they picked my mother to be at the center of that campaign. And
Hmm.
it was a very big deal. So they literally came to one of our restaurants. We were thinking, oh, it'll be some like just a sign or a hologram of an upside down W. They literally came to down the existing road sign, replace it with another road sign that had been driven across the country that was an inverted arch. And as you can imagine, there was a tremendous amount of media interest in this and the flipping of the arches. And who is this woman, Patricia Williams? And oh, and she has daughters, and oh, her daughters work with her. Who are these people? And so a lot of people became interested in our story. And that began several opportunities for us to share our story in the media. And so every March, around International Women's Day, these social media posts or articles continue to circulate. And as we continue to get interest, I thought to myself, people are interested in this story. They're very interested in my mother's story specifically because she's the beginning of it all. And she's also obviously an integral part of the succession. So my sister and I, our ability to both enter the business and continue it on, she's been retired since 2019. And so I decided someone needs to tell my mother's story. I think, I start the book really talking about the fact that she was born to a maid and longshoreman in New Orleans, Louisiana, and the segregated South.
Mhm.
So even the notion, neither of her parents completed middle school. And so for her to have come from such difficult, humble, and frankly disadvantaged beginnings, and to come out West and to create an opportunity for herself and her family, this is an inspiring story. It deserves to be told. And I think that people can be interested in it. And I also, one of the panels that Nicole and I have been invited to speak to over the years was specifically about family businesses and succession planning. And I can't tell you how many people have talked to me about how have you guys done it? Because it's not easy to take a business from one generation to the next. And so I thought that I'd be able to not only tell our story, but to tell my mother's story as a personal, kind of like a bit of a memoir, but not quite, or I guess a biography, but not quite. But I really wanted to make sure that anyone who read the book, who was interested, also could take some practical business tips. So I talk in the book, one, about, kind of the intricacies of a family business, what you need to know if you're going to enter the family business, but just some business basics, how to set up a business, structure, when do you need an expert? How do you appropriately market? How do you figure out what your customers are look for? How do you figure out who your customers are? So I really wanted to make sure that it wasn't just my mother's, albeit very interesting and inspiring story, but also a tool that people could use if they're interested in starting a family business or starting a business, frankly, of any kind, and succession planning to keep that business going on for generations to come.
All right. So a little bit to unpack there, but your mother sounds like a real inspiration.
She's incredible. In the writing, anyone who knows about writing a book knows that, most of it is just rereading and rereading and rereading and having others read it, etc. And so as I literally worked on this book for 7 years, because as I shared, this campaign was 2017. That's when I got the idea. I took a class on writing nonfiction books. So I started this journey 7 years ago, and I'm just now able to publish it this year in 2024. And I will tell you, the last time I read the book from beginning to end, I found myself like, I'm inspired by my own mother. I mean, she really, and I've written the book, I've read it 1,000 times, and I just continue to marvel at what she managed to do with her life. And, one of the examples that I share is her measure of success as a younger woman was, I want to get to a level of success where I can have a maid. And not that she thought there was anything wrong with what her mother did, but I want someone to to clean my toilets. Maybe I don't want to clean my toilet, and so for her to have so far beyond just being able to hire a maid, and to truly have created something that will impact not only my family for generations to come, but the thousands of people that have worked with and for her over the 40 years that our family has been in business, is just incredible. We co-sponsored an event with an organization here called Black Girls Who Ride, and they did a breast cancer awareness event that was, the beginning of the ride was at one of our Compton restaurants. We served breakfast. The mayor of Compton came, and we really just were trying to increase awareness around breast cancer health. This was maybe 2 years ago. My mom was at the event, and someone came up to us completely out of the blue, had never met this person ever in life. And she said, "Is that your mother over there?" Because my mother, she didn't speak at the event. My sister and I did. And we said, "Yeah." She said, "I worked for your mom 15 years ago, and she was so impactful to me. She changed my life. Your mother is the reason why I know many of the things that I know. I now have the career that I have I was able to buy a house because of just the way that she talked to me and the things that I saw that she was doing. And if I could tell you all the times that that has happened in my life, someone coming to me saying, your mom changed my life. It's just been incredible. And so I'm just so just proud to be a part of her story and to be able to share it with other people.
Well, that's a great point. The thing is, like, I don't think we often think about this, but the impact that that operators, restaurant owner operators have on people's lives. McDonald's. I mean, for a large portion of your workforce, I obviously don't need to tell you this. You're their first job, their first exposure to working on a day-to-day basis, and the lessons that they get from this job is a pretty important step in their lives. It doesn't really get, like we talked offline, I was taking my kid to get his driver's permit. That's a big monumental moment, but the day he gets his first job, that's huge. It's a huge, and that's an impact you have on their lives, and setting them off for success. That's actually, I don't really think about it. It's a pretty important role.
It's honestly a privilege. And, it's those kids, first of all, we do have a program where we offer scholarships for people who work for us through a program called Archways to Opportunities. But it's, the way I look at it is people come to us for, as you said, very often their first job. We would love for them to stay. And my absolute favorite story of that is our current director of operations, who, the way our organization is set up, my sister and I are business partners. We have one director of operations who reports to us directly, and he's responsible for the operations and profitability, really, of our entire organization of 21 restaurants. This gentleman, his name is Tomas, started working with us 30 years ago as a non-English speaking maintenance person. And he stayed with us all those years, has risen through the ranks, has had incredible opportunity. Daughter has gone to college, home ownership, trips. We just went with him. We had our international trip to Barcelona for our worldwide convention, was there with us. I mean, there are opportunities within McDonald's, within owner operator, franchise organizations, or even with corporate McDonald's. There's so much opportunity there that I wish that I could convey to your listeners. Don't look down on that first job at McDonald's, because as I said earlier, there are a lot of people whose stories are, I started as a crew person and now I own my own locations, or started as a crew person and I'm the director of operations for a large organization, or I started as a crew person, got money for college, went off to get my own degree, and now I'm a doctor, or now, like I said, I'm Jeff Bezos, or now I'm an actress in Hollywood. Whatever the path is, I think we at McDonald's are just very privileged to have been an opportunity to be a part of someone's journey.
Mm-hmm. So now you have your kids, and I assume you want them to get into the business, yes?
I don't know. My mom never once talked to my sister and I about becoming franchisees. Literally not one single time. I told her I wanted to be a lawyer. She said, great, have at it. I'll support you in that. My sister went on to get a master's degree in educational psychology. She was a social worker for 10 years before she joined my mom. It was never a thing that we thought about. So in all honesty, is there a chance that they could do it? Sure. But at the end of the day, and this is a really big part of my book, I don't ever want them to feel like I have pressured them to join the family business. This was my choice for my life and my family at this time, just as it was for my mom when she decided with my father to cash in their retirements to buy their first restaurant, just as it was for Nicole when she was finally ready to leave social services and work with my mom. And so, my younger son right now wants to be a professional soccer player. And my older son, after a summer doing moot court, said, maybe I'll be a lawyer. if that's what they want to do and that's what where their career path takes them, I will 100% support that, because I believe in the power and the importance of choice. They have to choose it when they're ready, because as we've already said, it's not easy. And it is particularly not easy being a business owner, and particularly a franchise business owner in the state of California. So you've got to have experience, you've got to have grit, you've got to have a true love for what it is that we're doing in order for you to come in and be successful in this business. So would I love it? Sure. I would love the opportunity for their legacy to be that they become franchisees. But if their legacy is that what I've done by getting involved in the business has created other exposure and opportunities for them, I could live with that.
Mm-hmm. So how is the operating environment in California right now?
Operating is a challenge. And I'm not sure how aware you are, but there is a very specific and narrowly tailored focus on the fast food industry in
I
California.
might have heard of it.
Yeah, perhaps. So at this point in time, our minimum wage for fast food employees only is $20 an hour. None of the neighboring businesses in any of the neighborhoods where we have restaurants are experiencing that same $20 an hour wage. That creates complications in a variety of different ways, including the fact that, the news talks about this all the time. We, as others, have had to raise prices. As we've raised those prices, our customers are coming to us less frequently, and those who do come are spending less money. And so what does that mean? That's a direct impact on our ability to give hours to our employees. So, some people at the very beginning of the wage hike, which was just 3 months ago, or 4 months ago at this point, I'm sorry, said, oh, are you going to lay people off? No, we're not laying people off. We are trying to see what this actually looks like. Can we weather the storm? So we certainly have not laid people off, but I can say we have not been able to give people as many hours as they're used to receiving, because our sales are down and our guest counts are down. And so that makes it very challenging. Here in the city of Los Angeles, as I mentioned, we have about 8 restaurants in the city of Los Angeles. We are potentially facing further regulation by the LA City Council that would impose additional costs on us. That would make it even more expensive for us to run franchise restaurants in the city of Los Angeles. So we are very directly and specifically being targeted as an industry. And with as I'm sure you already know, and perhaps your listeners do as well, we already operate on relatively thin margins, and we certainly cannot, as much as you hear in the media, oh, there was an $18 Big Mac. We're not selling $18 Big Macs. That was a one-off in some place. I don't know what happened. We can't sell $18 Big Macs. We can't price our way out of this issue. And, though I really am grateful for what the franchise business model has given our family, one of the difficult things is that people look at us, they drive down the street and they see Golden Arches and they think corporate McDonald's. They don't realize that what's actually happening is that we are local business owners. We live in these communities. As I said, we were born and raised in Inglewood. We have a restaurant in Inglewood. We live in the communities where we have restaurants. And, all of those additional costs are things that we have to bear. We don't get help or support for financial support from McDonald's. And people think, oh, we just thought McDonald's would bail you out. No, that's not the way it works. That's not the way the franchise business model works. And so when you sign up for that, you sign up to say, okay, I'll take care of all of these costs. And we as an industry are getting hit with cost after cost after cost. Insurance prices, food and paper costs, utilities, all inflation, all of these things are hitting us at this time. So that's a very long way of saying it is a very difficult operating environment for franchisees right now.
Yeah, that's why it takes grit to operate the restaurants, I guess.
Absolutely.
Right. Persistent.
And frankly, we're very lucky that we've been in it for 40 years. So we are able to use the benefits of being in business for a long time, but it creates a very challenging environment for those who are new And I don't even think, quite honestly, there are opportunities for new individuals who are interested in franchising to really enter the state of California because it's just so difficult.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, and I could I could definitely go all day about that particular topic, but I am just about out of time. But I will say one of the misnomers about franchising in particular, and particularly for big chains like McDonald's, is that what people forget is that they're the franchisee is charged a large number of costs. So you versus that restaurant competitor down the street, you're going to have rent that you pay McDonald's, which is going to be somewhere in the neighborhood of 13+%. And then, and then of course you're going to have the what McDonald's now calls a royalty and the ad fund. And so roughly most franchisees of these large brands do get a very good benefit of operating the brand, for sure. As we talked about for most of this podcast, but you are paying 20+% off the top. And that's not even getting into fees and other sorts of things. So the idea that franchisees are of McDonald's is somehow more profitable simply because they're McDonald's is just simply not true. Now they do have some wherewithal, but it's hard on franchisees and the franchise chain restaurants in California. Having to pay higher wages than even the neighboring restaurant down the street that doesn't happen to be part of a chain. It's that's tough. That's tough. For sure.
It is very difficult. And it's, you're right. There is a presumption that the corporate partner is going to somehow changes and positively impacts the things that we're dealing with. But the bottom line is we're business owners. And so we as business owners, and one of our biggest costs, yes, is McDonald's as our franchisor, and those are costs, they do not change. Those things have to be paid every single month with, if you want to continue to be involved with this brand. Mm-hmm. And so it is challenging, but as you said, you do a risk benefit analysis and we've at this point, of course, the benefits for us and our family and our mother have been tremendous. So I don't want to downplay that. We have been frankly very blessed in our lives, but as you said, and it's not just, the restaurant next door, it's the CVS and the Macy's and all of those places that are their people are not making as much as our people are, which makes our higher prices more difficult for them. Yeah. So it's difficult.
Right. Superb. Kerri, this was wonderful. I really appreciate you joining me on this podcast.
Thank you so much for allowing me to be here. I've really enjoyed the time.
And that should do it for this week's episode of A Deeper Dive, which was edited, as always, by Spoons, artwork by Nico Hines. You may find this and other episodes of the podcast on our website at www.restaurantbusinessonline.com/article/deeper-dive. And you may subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. I'm Jonathan Mays, your host, podcast producer, and the editor-in-chief of Restaurant Business. Thank you for listening. Growing your business can mean big-time logistical questions like, how are we going to keep up with all these local deliveries? Let Uber Direct offer you a helping hand. With Uber Direct, you take orders on your website, app, or by phone. Then drivers who are part of Uber's courier network pick them up from your store and deliver them to your customer's doorstep. Sounds simple, right? Delivery just got better with Uber Direct. Learn more at uberdirect.com.